превръща несигурността в стратегия, кризата в катализатор за растеж. Ofir. Nice to meet you again. Thank you for
Likewise.
Yeah.
This is my clicker.
Yeah, you can use it.
Cool. Okay, hello everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about extreme conditions, and in the next 15 minutes I'm going to dive together with you into the challenges, the company, and the successes over the past 15 years. But first, this event is called Digital Trends. So let's talk about the trend that brought most of the digital era to our hands, which is smartphones. So how did we get here? This chart represents the shipments of worldwide smartphones over the years. We can see in the past 10 years, almost every year on average, over 1 billion new devices are new to the market. But we can also see that between 2014 and between 2010 and 2015, that was the mobile boom era. That was the period where the growth was over 35% year over year on average. Which brings us to Viber. Viber was established at the beginning of the smartphone boom era at 2010. It was acquired at 2014 by Rakuten, an e-commerce giant from Japan, for $900 million. We have over 550 employees worldwide. We are one of the top 5 global messaging apps, and I'm proud to say the #1 messaging app here in Bulgaria. We have hundreds of millions of monthly active users, and we started by a simple messaging and calls service, evolved into what today we call a super app, a term which I'll get back to in the future. About me, so I was hired to Rakuten back in 2014. That was after the acquisition. 2 years later I was promoted VP Product, and 2 years later as COO, and since 2021 I'm the CEO of the company. One of the advantages or benefits of working for a Japanese company is that every year all the 70 top executives and CEOs of the group around the world all fly to Japan, and we climb Mount Tanigawa together, an experience which is both powerful and humbling. Back to our smartphone boom era. What's special about the smartphone boom era is, unlike today when we buy a new device, back in those days, or we replace our existing device, back in those days, we all met our first smartphone. Try to remember the first time you opened the box of your iPhone 3G or your Samsung Galaxy 2. That was the moment we fell in love with this, and that was also the era where Viber grew from 0 to 200 million users, or what we call the hyper-growth stage. We grew because what happened, if you recall, when you bought your first smartphone, it was usually after a friend showed you his smartphone, his or hers, and they showed you this cool new gadget and all the things that you can do with it, and that smartphone usually has either Viber or WhatsApp installed, which is why you installed one of the two, and one of the reasons why Viber grew so significantly, using the oldest marketing campaign in history. Care to guess which campaign it is? Word of mouth. Essentially, Viber grew from 0 to 200 million users back in that era with zero marketing spent. There wasn't a single dollar spent on marketing, and we didn't have any marketing team because we didn't need it. But not to say that we didn't have other unplanned expenses. So growth came cheap and easy, but on the other hand, if you know, when you install Viber or an app like Viber, we authenticate your phone number using an SMS. So the company that bears the cost of this SMS is the service, in this case Viber. And that's practically the de facto and safe way to authenticate that you actually own the phone number. And the people that came up with the business plan for Viber back in the day didn't account for the cost of SMS, because the assumption was SMS is cheap, the cost is negligible. Well, what happened is, after a couple of 100 million users later, these not so negligible costs started to add up, reaching millions in annual SMS costs. Which brings us to the first takeaway of my presentation today, and one of many I aim to leave you with. And the first takeaway is pretty straightforward, is that at hyperscale, cents turns into millions very quickly, and we'll get back to this later in the presentation. So, recap, after 4 years, the company had fantastic and unexpected growth in a new smartphone era. We had no marketing costs, we had other unplanned expenses in the form of SMS, and we practically didn't have a business model, so there was no revenue or significant revenue done. The company was loss-making. Then came 2015. With it came all the games that we know, so we know Candy Crush, we know Angry Birds. That was the period where the mobile industry started to generate millions and billions in revenue. And obviously that was the time where we set our eyes to profitability as well. In this slide, we can see most of the services that were making a lot of money were games. Up until this day, gaming is what's driving most of the revenue in the mobile industry, which brings us to the challenge of Viber. Because unlike a game, the mobile messaging industry is a bit different. It's an industry which is mainly subsidized either by large companies or by personal fortunes. So there is no profitable business model, and I'll name just a couple of examples. So the global market is controlled by Facebook, Messenger, and WhatsApp, both owned by Meta. They are loss-making for Meta as a standalone service, but obviously providing a lot of value to Meta in other ways. We have Signal and Telegram, which are both funded by the fortunes of their founders after having sold different companies to their previous company to other companies. We have Snapchat, which has not turned a full year of profitability since being founded in 2011. And then there's us, which we aim to change this, at least for our destiny. So the three main business challenges we had was how to monetize in a non-monetizable market, or in other words, low ARPU. ARPU stands for average revenue per user, so the ARPUs in messaging are super low to non-existent. The network effect, and I'll touch upon that, when you download an app like Viber here in Bulgaria, you have a lot of friends, so most likely you will be retained as a user. But if we want to enter a new market, just marketing Viber as a cool purple app with a lot of features isn't enough, because you might like it, download it, but if you have nobody to talk to, you will churn very quickly. So this network effect, which works to our advantage in markets where we have high penetration, works to our disadvantage in new markets, which means the regular marketing tactics of user acquisition don't add up. So we had to write our own book when it comes to marketing. And we are compared with loss-leading alternatives. So we are providing a service, we aim to come up with a profit, and we're competing with subsidized, sometimes related to security, alternatives. So the goal we set out was to be sustainable in our profit and growth by creating a new-to-market business model. We went back and recalled that we paid a lot of money for SMS for our activation. And then it clicked. If we are paying a lot of money, it means everybody else is too, including advertisers. So we came up with a new business model. Instead of SMS, Viber Business Message. This is a standard SMS from a food delivery service, all pretty much familiar, and this is how a Viber Business Message looks like. It has an avatar for the business, it has a catalog, it has a call to action button, pricing, additional information buttons. Essentially, a parallel solution which both the customers prefer, which is cheaper and converts better. The holy trinity of any business solution, combined with ads, it's no wonder that it worked. So Viber increased its revenue double-digit year over year up until 2021, and we were on a roll. And then, which brings me to the takeaway number 2, is that if you are suffering something, then most likely others are suffering for it. So in our SMS example, if we're suffering for high cost of SMS, means others are also suffering, which might be a business opportunity, as we can see in this example. And that insight of providing value to businesses and users is what put the foundation for Viber's strategy today, which we are the super app around utility services, and up until this day, this is the core of Viber's strategy. Then came February 24, 2022. Anybody care to guess what happened on that date? That's the date where Russia invaded Ukraine, and we found ourselves in situation where two of our top markets were at war overnight. So at the moment of the invasion, Viber's users, Mao's monthly active users, were almost 40% between these two countries, and our revenue was almost 45% between these two countries. Overnight, we could not monetize Russia because we decided to stop all ads, and obviously monetizing Ukraine was irrelevant at that time. So we found ourselves in a situation where we had to adopt quickly, so we came up with a strategy of two-channel strategy. The first is, we called it the first aid, essentially fast solutions which have strong revenue potential. And then we had what we call the long-term adjustments, which were strategy adjustments that were more sustainable, but obviously by nature slower to implement. And the criteria for a solid first aid was we had to leverage our competitive advantage, so we could not invent something that's completely new because the risk was too high. And we had to use our competitive advantage either by nature of the application, by expertise, knowledge, business knowledge, or technical knowledge. And then we obviously wanted to reduce the risks of these first aids utilizing our past experiences. Hence, we created Caller ID. Caller ID is a service which identifies the phone number that's calling, lets you know whether it's a spam call, a service call, a friend, and essentially what's made this a successful product and a good first aid is the fact that we already had the knowledge of spam and how spammers are behaving. We already had the database of phone numbers because of the nature of the application. But most importantly, Viber was already installed on all these devices. So essentially, users did not need to download a third application or another application, and we didn't have any user acquisition costs. So leveraging our competitive advantage. And together with the service, we also added the monetization part, which is this ad placement after finishing a call together with action buttons. What's also nice about this solution is that this is displayed after every regular call, not only after Viber call. And regular calls happen a lot more on a smartphone versus a Viber call, sometimes 3 to 5 times more. So essentially what we did here is expand our touch point with our users. Instead of touching our users only when they use Viber, now we touch our users every time they make or get a call. Takeaway number 3. If you're already invested in something, check how you can monetize it. The AWS example, Amazon needed cloud services for e-commerce, ended up selling those cloud services to other companies. We already were invested in spam and fraud moderation, and we use that in order to provide a service to our users. And the takeaway number 4 is seek to expand the touch points with your users, like we expanded touching our users not only when they use Viber, but also with calls. Viber Plus subscription is the second first aid I'll touch upon today. It's essentially a paid service, premium service, where people pay to get certain levels of features or advanced features. And this addresses the ad fatigue and addresses the fact that we can't keep adding ad placements to the app if we want to monetize it because it's not sustainable. However, when we started this, somebody said, and rightfully said, we know the messaging app is subsidized and most people would never pay for a messaging service. And we kind of threw into the air and said, well, more than 99% of users would never pay for a messaging app. And we recalled our previous takeaway number 1, recall, at hyperscale, sense turns its millions. So we said, okay, if it works against us in cost of SMS, maybe it can work for us at generating revenue. And it did. If it hadn't, this wouldn't have been takeaway number 5. Essentially, what we see here is the growth of Viber Plus subscriptions. And I can tell you, yes, the number of subscribers is less than 1%, but at Viber's scale, less than 1% means a good couple of tens of millions annually. Also, when I look at graphs, I also like to see what story do they tell. So what's the story of this graph? We can see this jump here around mid last week, where in a single month, we grew almost 40% in number of subscribers. So what's the story behind this? I'll share it with you. So when we started Viber Plus, the value proposition to users was, we'll give you a service with no ads, we'll allow you to customize the app, so change the app icon, colors, so UX customization, and we'll give you some utility features like convenience, voice to text. This is what we thought would make people pay. And then the team decided to experiment with a different feature. This feature is called delete without a trace. You remember when you know this incident when you send somebody a message but it's the wrong message, or you send the right message to the wrong person and then you quickly delete it, but the app says that you deleted it, and then the person asks you why did you delete it, and then you get into this embarrassing conversation of explaining why you deleted what you deleted. If you buy Viber Plus, you can delete the message without leaving a trace. And this feature alone jumped the number of subscribers almost 40% overnight. So we said, okay, we got something here. And then we added more of these features. So the ability to leave a group silently. Remember when you leave a group, it says, there's a little toast that says, X has left the group, and then people start wondering, okay, why did he leave the group? Did we say something offensive? Does he not like us anymore? So now, if you have Viber Plus, you can leave a group without anybody knowing that you left the group. And then you can hide your on and offline status. Or you can edit a message without a trace, and then the other person didn't know that you had a typo, or that you were upset and emotional and they actually toned down your message. If it's your boss, it's even better. So you can now edit the message without any trace. And what we found out is that these features, it was actually what made people pay. Essentially, the takeaway here is that, the first one is that a stagnating feature is only one insight away, like in our case with delete without a trace. And the insight itself is another takeaway, which is that users are willing to pay up to 10 times more just to save themselves the pain of embarrassment over improved convenience. So the impact of everything we did, including the strategic changes in retrospect, can be seen here. So this is the company's revenue. We can see after the war started, revenue came down. We had to make the adjustments, and ever since, we are back on growth of double digits year over year, reaching record years and hopefully breaking another record in 2025. But I didn't talk about the long-term adjustments. So very briefly, what we did over the long term is that we doubled down on what we call the super app strategy, essentially bringing more services and more capabilities to our users. So we added the ability for small and micro businesses like here in Bulgaria to open a Viber entity and manage it. So using a catalog, talking with their customers, we also added payments. So the same small micro businesses can receive payments from their clients, and also Viber users can transact with each other. We also added Viber dating. Viber dating, the ability to already leverage the fact that we are installed, the same insight we got from caller ID, so we don't need to pay for user acquisition. We already have all our spam mechanics, so we can make sure these are real people. And the product is doing very nicely. Now I can talk about these three products for a lot, but however, this brings me to the end of our time and to the last takeaway, which is always leave your audience wanting more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ofir.